Daylight savings time can kiss my ass.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon, and he's the man cursing the coming of the light an hour earlier. Ladies and gentlemen, my host companion, Sejan Sarwick. Sejan.
Wait, but it's not an hour early, right? Because it's spring forward, so it's actually an hour later than what it would be normally this time, right? Like, this would be 8 o'clock, but it's 9 o'clock, that kind of thing.
Right, but the coming of the light is coming earlier, right? Or something like that. Like, that's why we're saving the daylight. Are we starting later? I don't know. Daylight saving time. This is all we got to say about it, because we have more important things. Poor example.
We've bitched about this before, so let's move on. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Poor ejemplo. Sejan, have you heard the big news?
I don't know, Tev. We did this already. I can't tell you whether or not I've heard it until you tell me what it is, and I can tell you whether or not I knew it.
Well, in addition to being daylight saving time, it's also Mario Day. And what better day to celebrate Mario Day than with giving us a release date for the Switch re-release of Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. It's coming May 23rd, 2024.
Hell yeah, man.
Yeah.
Did they finally put a price on it or what?
They put a date. I don't know if there's a price on it. I was more excited about the date because right now, Switch-wise, Operation Galuga comes out Contra, but luckily that's no longer a Switch exclusive from the Go, so I'm probably going to get that on my PlayStation or maybe Steam. Sorry, Nintendo Switch. But then on the 22nd, Princess Peach Showtime comes out. And we got a little taste of that, Sejan. Did you get a chance to play the demo?
I did, actually, yeah.
What'd you think of it? Let's first impression, Princess Peach Showtime.
Oh, man, we're rolling right into this. I really enjoyed it. Like, I'm really glad that they gave us a little bit of taste of what it is. I don't know. Did we talk about this on air last week? Like this
no,
is
not
very
at all.
weird. This is a weird kind of thing where, like, we don't really know the genre, right? Like we weren't really sure how this game plays, right? Which is exactly why a demo is appreciated, because now we know that it's got a little punk to what it does. It's a platformer. It's an action platformer, but also at the same time there's some quick fire puzzly elements, shall we say? Something a la like your WarioWares or your Mario Party games. There's a little bit of that attitude going on in some of it too. It's a pretty healthy mix. At least the demo was a pretty healthy mix of just like run and gun and then like let's do this fun puzzle for a bit. And I don't know. It was very, very cool to have my hands on a Nintendo game that is trying some new stuff. And like story-wise, it seems really fun. Looks really pretty. It's a little hitchy, but that could just be the demo / also we've talked about in the past. The Switch is just not the most powerful system out there, and that's something we all just have to kind of live with sometimes, right? But like image to image, like it is a gorgeous game. There's really fun visuals going on in this game. But yeah, I mean, like from the demo, from the 2 levels that we got in the little lobby area, like I am in. Like I'm very excited to get my hands on the rest of this game.
I agree. I was comparing it to Wario Land a little bit, mostly because of the fact that it feels like she gets different costumes, and then those give her the different abilities, which is slant to Wario. When he gets hit with fire, he becomes he runs really fast until he becomes a fireball, or he gets pricked by certain bugs or other enemies, and he'll blow up, and he'll be able to float for a little bit. Like it seemed like it was that, and I was still excited for it. There's that because it's a new Peach game. But then playing the game, my immediate thought was, oh, there's a lot of Luigi's Mansion 3 in this, which is a crazy thing for me to say because I've not finished Luigi's Mansion 3, and the only reason I say it is the little gems that you need to collect in the 2 demo levels felt very reminiscent of, on this floor, there are 9 different types of gems to collect. And that being sort of the collection portion of Luigi's Mansion 3. So that's where my mind went. But then the game itself...
Yeah, but Right. Well, sorry, before we get too far away from the Luigi's Mansion thing, like, and in collecting those gems, it's stuff like everything from complete the level will get you a gem, but also like don't forget to water every plant. Don't forget to check that you go behind this door and or strike a pose in this section, and like you get brought to a bonus area. So like very much in that Luigi's Mansion vein of like there's smaller goals within the larger goal. And sometimes you're not even really aware of it until you get to the end and you're like, oh shit, apparently there was like 6 other stars I could have gotten, that kind of thing. Although I will say, I'm very proud of myself. I cleared the first one with every star, the sword fighter level, pretty much just like by exploring and figuring shit out was able to kind of get every one right. Not the case on the baking one. I am actually excited to, after we're done recording today, show it to the family and in that go back and see if I can get some more of those stars in the baking level. But yeah, very Luigi's Mansion in that regard.
Yeah, I did not get them all on the baking level, and I will say this: I dug that if it was a task that you had to complete that had extra stars or like sparkles, I think they're called, for you to collect if you had done it better, it does show you on the list that you missed out on however many you missed out on. It puts a nice little red X, so it's like, okay, well, at least when I come back, I know that is why I lost those particular sparkles. So I'm not going to beat my head against the wall trying to find it.
Yeah, for all of the like theme change-ups and all that, like it's a very straightforward game in a lot of ways, at least from what we've got so far. And in that, things like the visuals very clearly stating to you like, hey, yeah, you just missed 2 and it's cool. Like this idea that you get the feeling that it's okay, I can come back for it later. It very much encourages that. So in a lot of ways, I've seen a couple of people kind of putting it in the category of something like a Kirby's Epic Yarn or what is the Yoshi one? The
Woolly World
World,
or Crafted World?
Yeah, yeah, but in that
same
vein as well, right? Which again is another one of those styles of games where there's goals within levels that you can sometimes, if you push yourself to go looking around a little bit and like hit the right things, you get different stars and stuff. So yeah, it feels like it's very much a Nintendo game. They're not doing anything so weird that it's just like, oh my god, I can't believe Nintendo made this. But at the same time, it's doing a lot of stuff in a setting with characters that we don't really get to play with often, if ever, right? Like, I mean, like, this is a pretty big deal for like, this is not Peach's first main game, right? Well, I guess it's her first like main console game.
Yeah, exactly. Right? That's the big deal about it, is that it's the first console game where you're going to be playing as Princess Peach, because you also have Super Princess Peach on the DS, and that game, as much as I love that game, the whole Princess Peach's power is that she cannot control her emotions. That always kind of sat weird with me.
Yeah, it's a weird concept. Yeah.
And the game feels half finished. Like, you get to the end of it and you're like, oh, is there going to be more? Or, oh, I collected everything. And then there's not that, like, Mario extra stuff to do in the post game that I had come to expect when I played that game.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens with this one, because it feels like there's a really... That's the other thing, is that the end of the demo is, of course, an ad for the rest of the game, right? Like, you hit a point where it just shows you some of the other stuff. And getting our hands on 2 of the costumes, then seeing that there's like, what is it, like 10 others, right?
There's 10 total, so...
Oh, there's 10 total, so 8 others. But like seeing the other costumes and seeing some of the other moments that you'll be like, quote unquote, playing, sometimes that stuff is video and you don't realize it, but it was just really, it's the perfect demo in that regard. I wanted more by the end of it. It shows you that slice of what's to come. It still has me kind of scratching my head, in good ways, about what is going on, where, like what other ways are you going to be able to play this? How are they going to push things, right? So I'm hooked.
Yeah, I am too. Patissiere Peach was one that I was a little nervous about. I didn't want to be like, oh, it's just a sword fighter, but you hit stuff with a whisk and you have a projectile with the frosting. No. Like, the fact that it is WarioWare is like the perfect like descriptor of it. The fact that you have to mix up and bake cookies, and then the finishing the cakes game. I could play an entire game that is just the finishing the cakes game.
Oh my God, I got so freaking close to perfecting that one, and I was so mad because at the last second I forgot that you had to submit. Like I submitted every other cake, fine. I don't know why my brain farted on the last one, but I finished the last cake and then never submitted it, and time ran out.
Oh, Siegen. Well, you got to go through the level again anyway, right? So
Yeah,
there's something to look forward to. I only missed the baking, the cookies one, were the only stars that I had missed in my first playthrough.
Yeah,
and
oh
I'm
my
just
God,
like,
because that one is like you got what that's the other thing about what we've tasted so far is I do understand where I made the mistakes, right? Like I see
yes.
where I need to work on in order to get better. So the fact that I am not like immediately good at it is while disappointing. Like not to the point where it's frustrating, right? Like it is very much like, okay, I know what I need to do next time. There is something to the idea that I'm going to have to really hone in on like the cookie part, like how good is too good before you burn the cookies, like that kind of thing. Like there's a level of just rightness to everything that you have to do in that baking level, which is perfect, right? Like as a concept for a baking level. But there's just that little bite to it that makes me want to go back and get it right. And then like I know that within like 3 days of this game being out, there's going to be videos of people on YouTube that are just like perfecting that shit, and that's going to be so satisfying to watch.
What I really liked about that cookie game is not just getting it perfect when it's you alone, but those ones where you have the assistants to help you bake that can net up to like a double batch of cookies, and how the timing is different when you have two other cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like, it changes what you. Yeah.
So you can't just get complacent with it. You kind of have to be engaged. And I'm sure after like 4 or 5 times doing the game, I will start to have a rhythm and get better. But that first time, like, oh, now there's these two guys. Oh my God, it cooks so fast.
It went so much faster that time. Yeah.
Like I hadn't even considered that might happen. I just thought this is going to be a lot of cookies, so they're there to help me carry it. No, they did a really good job in the demo, and some like Cowgirl Peach I'm really excited to play with. I had not looked at any of the transformations till the demo. Spoilers then if you want to be completely surprised, just a heads up. Cowgirl Peach is focused pretty heavily in the marketing for whatever reason, so that's why I don't feel bad about that one. But like I didn't know there was going to be a mermaid Peach. That seems exciting to me. After Shantae, like all I could think was Shantae. And also the Little Mermaid game on the NES. Like that there's a ninja Peach and like a kung fu Peach, and how that's going to differ in what you do as the character. I'm super on board for this game. I'm very excited to play through it.
Also thematically, just the whole concept of her being at a play and the ways in which that feeds into the style of everything. You know, everything is stagecraft. Everything has got this like 2D plane, like 2.5D plane to it and stuff like that. There's just there's a lot of really like I said, really cool visual stuff going on. I do hope that the game runs a little bit smoother once it comes out in full, because it was my only thing is that I was having all these beautiful like visuals and they just kept getting caught on themselves a little bit as it was going. I also didn't play handheld though. I have been playing through TV, so I wonder if handheld, if it runs a little bit smoother.
I mean, I was one of the lucky few who was able to get a RetroTink 4K, and that does upscale the Nintendo Switch. It has settings to do that. So I've been playing on that 4K setting, and I still had those like little hiccups. So those were still there. You can't smooth out that. That is a hardware issue. But the visuals of it in 4K, I was like, oh my God, this looks so good. Because the only other thing that I've played in 4K through that is Mamoru no Bankaru, right, which I still need to finish. I'm working through it. But I have done that one through there, and that, you know, you're a little distracted by the fact that you cannot read the words that are on the screen. So you're not really noticing that. And the other one was Mario versus Donkey Kong, which I completed this week. I finished the expert levels and everything. So happy to say I liked the new ending. It was a good time. I'm glad I got my money's worth on that game, because I was a little nervous after the first playthrough I would never touch it again. And then I'm like, well, Mario Day's coming up, and let's see what we can do. And it changes the game up enough that it feels like a new game, the plus worlds and everything. So I understand how some people were like, this is a Game Boy Advance game that's been up-res to this. There are 2 new worlds. Like, it's weird to think of that, because the Game Boy Advance game, it was 6 worlds, and this one is 8. So there are some differences that I was unaware of.
Plus mode. I don't think the Game Boy Advance had a plus mode.
It did have a plus mode, but you needed to perfect every level before you unlocked, well, like the second world. The way that Super Mario Brothers 2, the original Japanese version, is like, this is just a parallel world to what happened in the first game. Like it's like another world, I think is what they call it, sort of like borrowing from the Punch Out Another World circuit and things like that. But yeah, it was a blast playing through that game. And I'm like, I love Donkey Kong 94. I'm a little surprised they didn't drop that on the Game Boy section, though maybe once this game has been bought and people enjoy it, they'll drop that one. That game's incredible. The Donkey Kong that came out in 1994 that starts out as just, oh, it's just a remake of Donkey Kong, and then suddenly you're on an airplane. I don't know how you get on that airplane level, but it's fun. You climb through the top of a pyramid, and I guess you jump on board an airplane. Like, I would really like to see an anime or adaptation to film specifically of Donkey Kong 1994 and how he goes from all the places they go. They start in the city, and then they wind up in like a desert and in a jungle and on a ship and all sorts of crazy things. The iceberg that takes them to the final level. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, well, man, it's the era of we need to have an ice level because every game has an ice level. We need to have an underwater level because every game has an underwater level.
Can we have a plane level? Every game doesn't have a plane level. I wish that had gotten picked up. I do love a good plane level.
Yeah, the plane levels there's definitely a trope of that, right? Like even in the Princess Peach preview, there is definitely a level of Cuphead-esque plane. She's like Mega Man looking.
Right, yeah. Mega Man Peach. I don't know what it actually is, but yeah, she does look like Astro Boy, I guess would be the.
I was thinking more Samus, but yeah.
Well, I was thinking Samus before I saw what the level was going to be, and then it's like, oh, that's total Astro Boy styling. But that's me. But also, I guess while we're talking about Mario Day and new Mario games coming, we should also mention that the Switch re-release of Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, which I hate. I think I've gone on record before on the show saying I fucking hate it, but I'll say it again. Fucking hate that game because it was released when the DS was like, we have to compete with mobile games. So instead of being like deep immersive experiences, it's like 10-minute chunks and then you're kicked back out to the lobby to go back in. That's weird. I don't love that one as much as I could or should. But it's coming out on June 24th. So all the games, now the talking heads on YouTube and the internet can definitely complain we have nothing else coming out for the Switch. Because everything that was announced and like hinted at has release dates, and nothing is release date after June 24th. So we have a whole back half of this year where we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I think it's one of those situations where this has just always been the cycle now. When I say always, but I mean, like, for the last few years with the Switch especially, like, it's just been, I've heard people talk about how there's nothing on the Switch this year every year. Right, and then inevitably a slew of announcements comes out and people get super excited, and then we hit a dry spell again. Not of games coming out. It's never like, hey, there's this period where we're just not getting games. It's just this period in which we don't have like previews or information or any knowledge of what is to come. And it's a little refreshing, to be honest. I'm sick of hearing about games 3 years in advance and then like people just ragging on them, and to the point where by the time the game comes out, it's not even worth playing. You've either heard everybody talk about how it's going to go anyway. Everybody's giving you reasons why it's the worst game ever made. Everybody's decided in advance whether or not the game is going to succeed or fail. Like, all of that shit just is really an unpleasant part of the fandom right now, and like Nintendo completely avoiding any of that by just not telling people information has been pretty refreshing.
That's fair. It's just when everybody was saying, like last week, that's when we touched on, we knew this game was coming, Princess Peach Showtime, and it was all, why is there nothing coming out for the Switch? And it's like, well, there is something coming out at the end of the month, at least. But now I would be not more forgiving of that, because you're not wrong. Like, I'm tired of that just being the messaging for the Switch, is that there are no games on it, which is just not the case. But now that we officially don't have any releases for like the later part of the year, I could understand people feeling that way. And especially when you consider that by all the leaks and accounts, not to add any credence to them, but they were coming fast and heavy, and September for the Switch follow-up was in a lot of people's mouths. That is what it looked like, is the reason why we aren't going to get any more announcements, is because there weren't going to be any more games released exclusively for the Switch, but more for whatever's coming next. And now that those same people who are saying September are saying it's not coming out till 2025, added to the fact that the new Pokemon game that was talked about on the Pokemon Day live stream was more information in 2025, it just feels more and more like that's probably going to be the case. And that's a little disappointing.
Better than PlayStation.
Yeah, that's... Yeah, it's kind of hard to ignore that they're like, yeah, we're done with the PlayStation 5.
And have been for a while. We just didn't tell anybody.
Yeah. I can't believe it. Like, it was so hard to get, and I don't want to think about it.
Well, I think that but I mean, I think that that's the story, right? Is like, we have always known, like, we never have true insider information, least of all us here on the State Report. But I mean, fans in general never have the true insider information that they think they do, right? But one thing that I think we have all pretty much known for as long as we have been this deep into the fandom, is that the hardware is not what makes the company money, right? Like, it's always about, like, sell the hardware at a loss and then make the money back on the software. And the problem with that is that, like, you do need to then make sure that the hardware gets out there. There's a risk reward to that, right? Like,
Yep.
You're going to be losing a bunch of money, but you do need to make sure that that hardware gets out to as many people as possible, because that's what allows you to rake in as much money as possible on the software releases, right? And so the second that it struggled to get into people's hands, like, there's a reason why people focused on that so much, is because it really needed to get over that hump in order to ever do anything, and it never did, right? It's the same reason that I think something like the Wii U, like, didn't succeed. People can talk about the, like, technical issues or the style issues or things that they had with it, but at the end of the day, if enough people bought that system, like, the Wii U had so much potential and had a lot of great games on it that people just don't, like, talk about because not enough people had it in their hands, right? PlayStation's kind of going through that moment right now, you know?
Yeah,
Xbox had the same thing happen with the Xbox One, right?
Yeah, the one was like that as well.
Yeah, but then they came right back with this last generation, and they overtook. So, you know, we'll see what PlayStation does. But yeah, the second that they couldn't get PlayStations into people's hands, that was a pretty big sign that there was going to be some issues with this particular generation for PlayStation. But the other thing is that we've seen people overcome those kinds of issues in the past. They just never seemed to do it themselves.
Yeah, I think the weirder thing about PlayStation being like, yeah, we're fucking done with the PS5, just like how candid they were about it, is also the fact that because of that delay in getting them into people's hands, like, the PS5 generation was not exclusives until, like, the end of 2022.
Well, don't say that to an Xbox fan. They'll list off a million things that they wish they had gotten, but PlayStation stepped in and didn't let Microsoft sell them, apparently.
But but that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is games were still being released to the PS4 and the PS5.
Yeah, within its own ecosystem.
Yeah, within its own Sony ecosystem. There was no reason. Sejin, right? I'm using you as an example. You do not have a PS5, right?
No, I mean, and it was not for lack of trying, but at the time when I wanted one, it was impossible to get a hold of one. Prices were going up, scalping and all that. And then by the time all of that calmed down, I looked around and realized that I could still get stuff on my PS4, so why would I?
Yeah, I mean, your PS4 sounds like it's going to explode into a mushroom cloud and take half your house with it when it's playing some of these games. But I think that's the really interesting thing to me, is that it's not like there was this time where you don't have a PS5 because it's impossible to get one, but that also means that you can't play the sequel to Horizon. You can't play the sequel to Spider-Man. Well, Spider-Man 2, but you could, like, Miles Morales was on both of them.
Right.
That doesn't mean you can't play, like, there were so many games that would have been the system sellers for the PS5 that were also put on the PS4 because we want to make sure this game gets out to people.
Yeah. Well, and then there is something here about like I don't want to be too cavalier about PlayStation having a bad generation here, because we are slowly approaching that point where I don't want to call it the final generation, but there's going to be a cumulative generation where that system, that hardware, that physical thing that you buy is going to be the thing that you then just play on in perpetuity, right? And what you might get are things like system updates or something like that. But we've talked about this for generations now of PlayStations and Xboxes especially, but even the Switch is kind of Nintendo's even getting to this point too, where like the hardware is kind of peaking to a point where it's not going to be about buying brand new hardware every 5 years, but rather, you're going to need some, like I said, maybe like system updates or things like that. Maybe they'll give you the ability to do things like up your hard drive space. They've already experimented in that in various ways with each console's system in that regard. But like,
well, popping an M2 drive into your PS5 to increase the storage on your PS5 is so easy.
Yeah.
And it's just like, this is incredible.
All I could think was the old Xbox 360, like where you had to like open the side panel in order to like
shove it in. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think everybody kind of thought that was going to be this generation, especially if you look at what Xbox has done with things like the streaming service, and you could have bought the one that didn't have a disc drive and things like that. I feel like everybody was really banking on this generation of consoles being that final generation, being that generation in perpetuity, where like you buy a PS5, we won't see a PlayStation 6. What we'll continue to see is just PlayStation 5 Plus, whatever they do to update the system. But generally, this is going to be the PlayStation going forward. So for this to not be, for this to be the one to not sell, is a little scary, right? Because eventually we are going to hit that point where this is going to be the last one we ever make of these, and it's not doing well. So does that, like, what do you do at that point, right? I am very curious to see what a PlayStation 6 looks like because of the fact that everybody was really talking about the 5 as being kind of that final step in terms of hardware. Xbox, we're going to have this conversation one day with Xbox as well. It's just that right now they're doing gangbusters, and you can just get just the digital one, and people seem to really be leaning into that nowadays with Game Pass and all of the ways in which people like demand to know if a game is going to be available digitally and things like that on the Xbox. So like I feel like Xbox is actually really close to that moment. But if PlayStation comes out with a PlayStation 6, that is going to make somebody at Xbox go, should we be doing something? Right? Like,
so the thing is, Microsoft, I don't love giving Microsoft credit here, but or for what they do, but they did a good thing with the Series generation, their Gen 9 consoles, because the discless one, the all digital one, was priced to compete with the Nintendo Switch, and the X version, the Series X, was designed to compete with the PS5. They saw the market and they saw where they were having like people carved away from them as consumers, and they reacted in a way that they could appeal to both of those people.
They did the Microsoft thing though, where they saw a problem, came up with an elegant solution, and then didn't bother telling anybody about it. Just assumed the market would figure its own shit out.
That is true.
So inevitably, you end up with all these conversations. I had these exact conversations both here and back in the day, back on like Super Kimchi and stuff like that. Of like I don't understand what the difference is between each system. If I want something that does this, which one am I supposed to get? I'm confused. And the pricing on one, they did the whole layaway model where like you could get it and then like pay in perpetuity, like in conjunction with your Xbox Live. You could be paying for the system as well, a la like getting like a new iPhone, that kind of shit. Like there was so much weird stuff that they did in the release of those systems that it really muddied the waters. In retrospect, being able to say, yeah, this one was like their PlayStation like killer, and this one was their Switch killer, and this is what they wanted was people in these two markets to still be able to come together in the same system and play the same games, right? They just knew that they had to aim in different ways. That is a great way of looking at it that Microsoft has never themselves come out and explained to anybody.
Yes, that is. When I first saw the Series S, I believe it was your brother who showed us, like, look, I got the Series S. And I'm like, it's that small? Like, I didn't realize how freaking small the Series S Xbox was. And then I'm like, oh, okay. So now the wheels in my head are turning, and I'm starting to understand that this is aimed with its $300 price tag at those people who are like, I'm not really using my Switch portably. I'm always just kind of hooked up to a TV. So it wouldn't be that hard to slot in an Xbox into that and have access to, some more powerful games than what the Switch has.
Right,
Where you also have people who are like, oh, I have all these other games and I want the backwards compatibility. I want to make sure that I can compete with what Sony is doing with the PS5. I'll get the Series X, and that has like a little bit more RAM to it, and it's got a little bit more teraflops, and I don't even know what those mean, but it is one of those ones where you can see how it compares more favorably to a PS5, where the Series S model is like, oh, you're like a Switch, but you're better, because you can play more modern games. I just don't have the portability factor. But if I'm not using that portability factor anyway, my $300 can get me what is a next-gen system that can play all of the same games.
Right.
Like, there are no Xbox Series X exclusive games. And that is the really interesting thing about Microsoft. But you talk about, we're going to get to that perpetuity system. And I don't think you're wrong. I think that Gen 9 systems, the PS5 and the Series X, were definitely like a dip of the toe into that situation, especially with the whole, you can buy any M.2 hard drive that is out there on the market, as long as it has like certain compatibility things, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't need to be a Sony branded one, right? It wasn't the Memory Stick 2.0. Which would have been a huge problem for them. But them saying...
No, they didn't make it proprietary, right?
Yeah. Them saying you can buy anything and it's this easy to do it, that was huge. And honestly, I don't think that Gen 9 would have been that final system, that cumulative system that you're talking about. But I think that the next generation definitely could have, if you could upgrade the RAM in the system. Right? Mm-hmm. And now that one, hopefully it's not proprietary, but if they had a proprietary, this is the Sony one, and it's very easy. Like, you just slot it into this plug in the back, or you can buy the frame where you plug in any RAM and just slot it into the back. They need to make it, the fact of the matter is, the reason why Gen 9 failed, if Gen 9 failed, and Sony has already kind of admitted that it has for them. I don't know if Microsoft would say the same thing about the Series X. But if it failed, the real killer is something like the Steam Deck and all of the other Windows portables that can be docked just like the Switch to be used as a gaming PC that have hit the market, because the barrier to entry for the PC master race, building a gaming PC and all of those things, is the fact that you need to know how to use a computer to do that, right? There are other skills you need, whereas you buy a PlayStation, you plug in the cords, you're playing PlayStation games. Mm-hmm. And by taking the Steam Deck and making that, but for PC gaming, that was huge. Essentially, it's what killed the Switch in a lot of ways. You look at that, and the reason why the Switch 2 was, we got to get this out there, is because this is totally cannibalizing your market. Because the eShop becoming the place to get indie games on consoles, that gets shot out of the water when you can buy a Steam Deck that can play all those same indie games that come out on the Nintendo Switch, usually a month or two earlier, with better performance because the Steam Deck itself is just a beefier handheld than the Nintendo Switch, and it should be, right? At minimum, it's $100 more than a Nintendo Switch to enter that ecosystem.
Yeah.
And it can also play like some of the hard-hitting current-gen games. It might not be at the highest settings, but if you want to play Resident Evil 4 Remake, you can do that on a Steam Deck. Not only that, Steam has the whole deck verified system, so you know that it's going to be at least a somewhat enjoyable experience. You're not going to be like, ugh.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the deck also has the memory so that with something like Resident Evil, just because you brought that up, half of the time on Switch when you're playing those games, you're not playing it off of your console.
You're streaming.
You need an internet connection. It's a streaming game, and that connection is going to really dictate what your experience is like, right? So if you're just like sitting in an airport waiting for a plane, you might not have the best connection, and so that might mean half of your games are pretty much unplayable on your Switch. And that's going to be a big factor going forward. Is continuing to trick people into thinking they actually own their shit, right? We are every day
at
more
the
and
precipice
more
of that.
Yeah. Every day more and more and more of the cobwebs are being kind of cleared away on that on that realization, and eventually it's going to be out there for everybody to look at, and we got we all got to kind of figure out where we stand on this and what we're going to do about it, because man, because that's the big thing right now with something like the Switch for me in that conversation. For me personally, one of the biggest things why I would still get a Steam Deck despite how much I sit here and gush about the Switch all the time is because there's a lot of stuff that I just can't simply do on my Switch. Either it's not there because it has not been released to the Switch, or if it is there, it's not the best version of that game that I can get my hands on. And then there is always going to be the conversation about the pricing in the Switch, like in Nintendo's whole philosophy on pricing, like is a important conversation. While I don't always agree with some of the stuff people feel, there's a lot of people out there that feel like Nintendo like overdoes it on the pricing for like these remakes and re-releases that they've been doing. I think that case by case, I think there's definitely some you could say that. I think there's some where that's not the case. But at the end of the day, they are pretty standard in their pricing, and that can bite them in the ass a lot. Whereas on the Switch, you have so much more dynamic. The Steam Deck, you have so much more dynamic pricing that like there's a chance that you could pick up that Resident Evil 4 one weekend for like $2.
Yeah, it's really also the Steam model of that first week of release. If you buy into the game, you'll get like 10% off. Is huge. Like Berserk Boy is a game that came out this past week. I haven't gotten a chance to play it, and we'll talk about why probably a little bit later in the episode. But it released for $20 on Switch or $20 on Steam with 10% off until next Wednesday. So that first week, if you buy it, you buy into it, we're rewarding you for being an early adopter by saving you $2. And that's a huge difference.
I mean, it's a huge. I mean, it is a built-in
reward.
Without even thinking about in specific games, without even thinking about specific things I want to play here or there. At the end of the day, the Steam experience in terms of the store and the purchasing and all of that has always been the superior experience to any of these console markets, right? And because of that, when I have a Steam Deck in my hand, I just feel better about my purchase in that regard. I know that they're going to do things like publisher sales on the reg. I know that they're going to do event sales on the regular. There is the official Steam sale every year, like the empty your wallet sale that everybody kind of half jokes about, but also we all love, right? That is so part of the Steam experience that it just makes it carries over to all this other stuff, right? Yeah, I'm spending a little bit more money on the hardware, but that's okay because in the long run, I'm probably going to save more than $100 in software this year alone with the kind of shit I can buy, / with the shit I already own, right? That's the other big thing about the Steam Deck is at the end of the day, it's also got the backwards compatibility, the backwards compatibility, quote unquote, of the Steam Deck is bar none. Like if you own it on Steam, there's a very good chance you can play it in some fashion on the deck, right? With the Switch, like I can only play things in the last 5 years, 6 years that have released on the Switch, right?
Yes. And there's also my favorite part about Steam is that you want to talk about backwards compatibility. It's going back to like Gen 7, Gen 6 game availability. I think of Double Dragon Neon. Double Dragon Neon is a game that I really enjoy. It's like an 80s-tastic slant remake of the original Double Dragon story. And it released on PS3, but it never got a release on PS4 or PS5. Whereas the Xbox, because of their continued like backwards compatibility, you can kind of keep playing it on the Xbox stuff, but then you can also play it on Steam because it was released on Steam back then. And now, because the game is, I'm trying to do the math in my head and like without like throwing up because it's just insane. Like 12 years old, the game is. You're paying like $10, and it's still a very playable experience.
Well, and like we'd be remiss because we sit here during the weekend of the great WB culling, the continuing right nonsense going on with them, and like we are sitting here in light of a gaming company choosing to delist games on Steam, right? So it's not like it doesn't happen that like, oh, things once they're available on Steam, they're available in perpetuity. That's not true, but there is more flexibility in that regard. And what we're seeing, for those who don't know, WB is basically doing to their video game side what they've been doing to the film and television side for the last couple of years. They're going through and just getting rid of a bunch of stuff. In their eyes, probably something like trimming the fat, I think would be the best way to probably put it. As a customer on the other end, I got some feelings about that. But essentially they're going through, and it seems like specifically they're focused on Adult Swim games right now. And which, for anybody that doesn't know, Adult Swim has been actually a huge player in the indie gaming market since the beginning since the old Xbox 360 days, right? Adult Swim has had their hands in this pie for a while, and apparently anything associated with them is officially getting sold off or removed and blah blah blah. A lot of those games we'll never see again. They'll be lost media, right? We are hearing individually from certain artists and publishers and things like that were smart enough to retain certain rights, that they are getting those games back, and then they're just going to list them themselves. Or I think one of the creators of one of the games isn't going to be able to do that. So what they've done for the next, because this was announced that in the next month they'll be gone. So they said until the game is gone, it's free. So there's a bunch of people like downloading games like that and stuff. So there's a little bit more flexibility in the Steam world when this shit does happen. But it does still happen there as well, right? Like I don't want to sit here and act like Steam is completely removed from this conversation of lost media. But at the end of the day, at least there seems to be some flexibility there. Whereas like on the Switch, as I mentioned, like if it was made for the Wii U, then it ain't. Then and there's not a remake for the Switch, then you're just not able to play it anymore. Sorry, bud. It's like, all right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and there's the question for me between the difference of delisting and like deleting the games. Them being delisted for sale, if you bought it, you can still access it, right?
Right.
Yeah,
correct.
So
I believe that is the term. Whereas if it is a deleted game, it means that you risk, if you ever connect that game to the internet, something getting borked. Like, It's not been unusual for games out there to get kill codes sent out to them, depending on what the situation was, stuff like that,
Yeah. And then also, since we're like just going doom and gloom and gaming, we have some more doom and gloom and gaming things to touch on. The Stellar Blade demo, what the fuck happened with that?
I didn't hear what happened. What's going on?
Stellar Blade is a new Sony PlayStation 5 exclusive game. It's releasing on April 26th. They dropped a demo while I was at work, and I'm like, I'll probably download it, right? But I'm at work, right? I am not able to download it.
What's up with Stellar Blade? Is this like a follow-up to something? Is this...
I don't know. I don't know enough about Stellar Blade is what I'm going to say. It seems like it's a new property set in space, and it's like sort of like Devil May Cry action attacky game. I've only ever seen like half of a demo, not half of a trailer, and even then I wasn't fully paying attention. it wasn't until people were like, so what do you think about Stellar Blade? You going to play Stellar Blade? And all these questions about this game where I'm like, I don't even know what it is. What are you talking about? And then, so I hear the demo. I'm like, oh, cool. When I get home, I'm going to download that demo. And I got home. I got cleaned up. I got changed into my comfy clothing for home. And then I like turned on my computer and I was about to turn on my PS5 to download it. And I read in like one of my social media feeds that the Stellar Blade demo has been taken offline.
Oops.
So I don't know if it released early as an accident. They didn't intend for it to happen. It was available for 3 hours and then it was completely deleted. And you cannot play it if you downloaded it. It's like this demo period has ended sort of situation. So
Weird.
I didn't get a chance to play it because it released while I was at work. And so I'm like,
maybe it was just like super broken or something. Was there any information beforehand about this intended release, or was it like a surprise drop or something?
I don't really know anything about it. Let's see.
We'll have to look into it.
Yeah.
No, I'm very curious to hear what's going on with it. There's been a lot of really interesting stuff with like broken games kind of rearing their ugly heads again. I mean, up to and including fucking Epic Mickey showing back up on the Switch.
Yeah, right. I'm very excited for more Epic Mickey.
I'm excited to see Epic Mickey get another chance. Because I actually very much adore everything about that game except for the act of playing it. I don't know. We'll have to see when it comes out.
I hope it will feel better on the Switch because I didn't like it. Tried to be Mario Galaxy, but it didn't work at all.
It was right.
No, I mean it looks like it's getting a full like re-res remaster treatment too.
Yeah.
Okay, so the demo was only available for 20 minutes. Of Stellar Blade.
Okay. All right.
It was never listed. It was listed. You could do it, but then they immediately unlisted it, and then it just said not available for purchase. But yeah, so it was 20 minutes, and people got it. Some people got it, and now you cannot play it at all. Excuse me.
Interesting.
It looks like the demo may have made its way to the PlayStation Store early. Currently, no official word or when it will or if it will return, but it was accidentally updated by mistake.
Clown show. Fucking clown show.
So it's just...
I mean, some poor guy out there was just trying to get something corrected and accidentally hit the wrong button.
Yeah. And that's the type of thing, though, where I say we're at this precipice with digital stuff because a lot of people realized just how much power Sony had over the files that are downloaded to your PlayStation when, I got it downloaded. Oh, you can't play this because we say no.
Yeah.
And they could do that with anything if they could do it with Stellar Blade.
Well, that's why I said it's not unheard of for there to be certain things pushed out that just completely, block a game, wreck a game, turn a game off. I mean, in its simplest example, think about any online MMO that has died over the last 20 years and how, people own physical discs of those things that they'll just never be able to start again because there's not a licensing key to ping or something like that,
Right.
There's all sorts of weird shit that we've run into, and we like we said before, people are really becoming more and more aware of this conversation. So
yeah.
I'm interested to hear where it goes because the more people become aware of this kind of conversation, the more people are kind of demanding an answer, and it can't come from the customer base. The customers know what they want. They want everything in perpetuity. But if there's going to be limits put on that concept coming from the companies, then they need to get their ass in gear and figure out a standard way they're going to do it, at least within their own shit, right? I don't need Nintendo, PlayStation, and Xbox to all agree on what they think the standard should be, but at least within Nintendo, I would like to be able to say okay, Nintendo considers this to be the rule. If this game is this old, or if this game is on the and in some ways the Switch is kind of the one that has the most obvious rules in place for that already.
Well, I mean, made me even stronger by what happened with the Yuzu emulator this past week.
Yeah.
That was scary. And as much as I'm upset that they just rolled over and settled out of court, I'm super happy it didn't get to go to court and create some friggin' legislature that could be used to completely destroy emulation in perpetuity across the internet.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I think that's probably part of the reason, at least, why they took that bullet, right?
Yeah.
we'll see what else happens. But people were laughing because I don't know if it's technically the Streisand effect, but it's kind of feels like it's in that wheelhouse of like, of course, the second they shut that one down, now everybody online is sharing all of these other ones that you can use instead and stuff, and or going into Yuzu and trying to get any code that they can, like save any concepts, any code, anything that they can from that before that goes away, so that they can then work them into other emulators and stuff. Like Nintendo, all they did was just kind of really draw so much attention to that world that now I feel like there's more people brazenly talking about it and doing it than there were 2 weeks ago.
Right. And I mean, I've Switch emulated. I will freely admit that here. Mostly in order to like translate games that are released and that I own a Japanese copy of. Hand in the air.
A week earlier than Seijin so that you can hold it over his head.
Yeah, but I've been doing that since Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. So I mean, that's established. That's historic. I love you, Seijin. I'm sorry. But no, it is something that I have done. I wasn't going to go as brazenly like I'm a criminal as you just made it look. Thank you. But I've never used Yuzu. I've used other ones that I'm not going to say out there, right? Because it's weird. Yuzu seems to have been the target, probably because of that time it was featured in the Steam Deck video. Like, it was the one that had the most screen availability. So it was easy for Nintendo to be like, they're the problem. They're the reason that Tears of the Kingdom didn't sell 1,000,000,001 copies. Like, you point to them and you have that. Like,
yeah, there is something tied up in all of this that like Nintendo has to be able to prove that as a brand they were damaged significantly enough to pursue this kind of shit, right? And that's part of what has saved as many people from not getting. People like to act like Nintendo comes down on every single instance that they can, right? We know that that's not true. Look at all the stuff where everybody was asking what they were going to do about Pal World, and they didn't. They haven't touched it, right? Like there's definitely a line for Nintendo where they won't go. It's just that line seems to be much further along than other people. So they deserve some of the shit they get for that. But part of why they don't go for every single emulator at once out there and figure out what's going on is like it's hard to say like an emulator that is, first of all, like we don't know how many people are using these things. People that use emulation are usually also the kinds to use VPNs, are usually also the kinds to do offline like devices and things like that. Like there's all sorts of shit that hides how many people are actually using these things. The very nature of their existence is that, right? Then on top of that, the idea of building a software that can emulate other software definitely gets sticky, but it's not nearly as bad as like the game side of it. Like the emulator versus ROM conversation gets really kind of hazy about like what's more damaging and what should be stopped and what shouldn't and that sort of stuff. Like there's a lot of gray area and a lot of haziness to the point that has protected a lot of people, as is often the case in these situations where there's a certain side that feels like what they're doing is morally justifiably correct, although the other side has the law on their side, right? Like there's enough of a gray area where people are still getting away with this stuff that like it's never going to go away, right? It's never going to die.
Yeah. I don't know. And I think the bigger issue with something like Yuzu is the fact that it is emulating a current gen system where, cause like all you think about is like Kaizo Mario and Mario ROM hacks and Link to the Past Randomizer are two huge markets on Twitch, right? In the retro space, those are two huge markets that have thousands of viewers, right? Some of the top earners on Twitch, that's where they make their bread and butter, is by doing those types of things. But they're also from a system that is 30 plus years old, right? So it's not, it's not hurting Nintendo the same.
Yeah, one of the big genres on YouTube is like ROM hack playthroughs, right?
Yeah.
Let's plays are like a huge part of the YouTube gaming element. People don't want to just watch you play Mario again, but they'll watch you play Mario again if you have a Guy Fieri spray in it instead, right? Like that kind of thing.
Yep.
There's this idea of of modding also kind of giving some longevity to these games, both in players' hands and elsewhere, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, because it's really strange that like then when Nintendo went after the Smash Brothers Melee online component, like
Oof. Yeah,
what
he
was the
actually,
choice on that?
yeah,
Like,
yeah. Ludwig, who is the YouTuber that was kind of involved in all of that stuff, he was the one that got shut down and then called out all the Panda stuff, and then everybody realized that yeah, Panda was getting a bunch of special treatment and all that. He just announced this week that he's bringing back an old tournament that they used to do called Mario Kart, where they get a bunch of YouTubers around for a Mario Kart competition, but there's a drinking element involved to it, right? Cannot imagine that Nintendo will be happy about that, right? And if this and this is the same guy that they went after last time for the Smash stuff, so like ballsy move on his part. I'm very curious to see what happens in that regard. Yeah.
I mean, and also along that same line, are you with the Mario Kart? Like right now, as Lego Mario Kart was announced as coming in 2025, right?
Like
where
the
like
sets, like the Lego sets.
it's like Lego sets, yeah, with it.
Yeah. Not like a game is what I'm getting
No,
at,
I
but
wish it
Lego,
were a
yeah.
game, but no, it's the Lego sets. Yeah, it'd be cool if it were a game. But again, like it's a brand that they're also going to be hyper protective of because they have this collaboration. And then if Lego's like, well, people are associating Mario Kart with drinking now, like, and we don't want to do this, like, then they're just screwed, right? So
yeah.
It's been an interesting week for video games, to say the least. And I don't know. And that's just, I guess that's the button to that one, right? I mean, it's just, yeah. Because I made a promise, right? And while most Say Report promises go unanswered and unfulfilled, it's time to talk about the new fall schedule, Sejin, or as I've been calling it, the new February schedule. Because all the shows came back in February as a result of the writers and SAG-AFTRA strikes. And then I was thinking before I sat down in the chair this morning to record this episode, I'm only watching one new series. No, that's not true. I'm watching 2 new series.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
that's
I mean,
it.
that's-
Like, there's only really 2 new series. I can't think of many others. Like, I mean, there was The Irrational for NBC. Check it out if you have Peacock. It's all still up there. There was the one with the lady who tries to find people, but surprise, surprise, she abducted her abductor and is keeping them in her basement. It's very reminiscent of The Eyes See, that Julia Roberts movie that was freaking terrible. What's the name of that movie?
I thought you were going to say the Sandra Bullock one, All About Steve. Where she
No,
tries to
not All
kidnap Bradley
About
Cooper
Steve.
for the whole movie.
That's solid. I get where you're coming from on that. I'm going to look up both of these.
I mean, there's Prisoners. There's I'm trying to think. It's not Julia Roberts though. I don't know. But yeah, and it's been a weird year. I think we all kind of knew that was going to happen with the strikes and stuff.
Yeah.
Part of why everybody was saying we need to end these strikes by this date, otherwise there's just not. There's not going to be anything to do for TV for the next year. That kind of stuff. I don't know. This is a hard conversation for me to have over here because like we've been off cable for a while. That's not anything new. You know, I think as long as this show has been on, like we've been. I have talked about how we cut cable, pretty early in the whole wave, right? But in the next thing has now come where people are now cutting streaming services, and we're definitely on that bandwagon as well. You know, not least of which because of like job situations and stuff out here. It's fucking tough in the tech sector and things like that. Like so. Things have kind of gone to the wayside. You know, I don't keep up on a monthly Netflix subscription anymore. Like we will pay for it and get it for a month if something comes up that we want to see, right? If there's like a specific thing. But that's always been my kind of philosophy about this stuff is just like if you're not finding anything to watch, stop paying for it. You know, like there's always been this conversation of, we pay this much for Netflix every month and we haven't watched anything on it for the last 3. And my next thought is, then why haven't you canceled it? You're not obligated to have this subscription, right? They've actually set it up pretty easily for you to go in, and a lot of these things will let you put your subscription on hold, right? There's definitely something to be said about how much money these streaming services all want nowadays, and there has not been any significant changes in what they offer in return. They're still offering the same stuff they always did. Netflix likes to tout that, like, now that they do their own creative projects, they need more money as like one of their reasons for price raising. But they've been doing that now. They've had their creative side now for 5 years, so you can't keep using that as an excuse to keep raising prices.
Longer than 5 years. I mean,
right.
Like you go,
but that's exactly. Yeah, there's this idea that just like, okay, like you're gonna start giving me original material. Yeah, I understand why the price on this might need to be going up, but we did that one already. We can't go back to that well.
You can't keep using that as the excuse.
So we've been rotating through streaming services, and so without that, I couldn't tell you anything new, quote unquote, we're watching in the house. We rewatched Star and the Forces of Evil this month.
That's fun. I never got into that one. Dale is like, I have a season left of it and hasn't gone back. Which, like, then I think of all the seasons I have, like, final seasons. Haven't watched the final BoJack. Haven't watched the final The Good Place. Like, I just, like, got almost to the end and then stopped. And that's just been me. For the record, the one that I was thinking of, the NBC show, is Found. Each year, over 600,000 people are reported missing in the United States. Gabby Mosley and her crisis management team use unorthodox methods to find the forgotten people. And then she also keeps someone secret, like, squirreled away. And the Julia Roberts movie that made me think of, because you're not wrong, there's a bunch of it, is Secret in Their Eyes, which I gave 3 stars when I saw it in 2015 on the IMDb out of 10.
I was going to say out of, okay, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm just like, that just felt like a big waste of time, and I didn't love that. So Irrational was new, but like NBC was able to drop that in 2023 because they had it kept away anyway. So then as soon as they could promote things again, once the strikes ended, they came back with that show. But the only 2 shows I watched that are, like, new, right, that is like, this is our first season, are Extended Family, and I'm not going to talk about Extended Family again. I'm sorry to the people who are still recovering from the last episode. And Tracker, and it's called Tracker, not Tracer. It's Tracker. Yeah, and I watching another one, right, that is, I love Canadian TV. I love Canadian TV so much. It's called Wild Cards. But Wild Cards ends on Wednesday. Like, well, not in America. Canada is a week ahead of us on broadcasts of Wild Cards. And I've been watching a Canadian stream of it.
No spoilers, please.
No spoilers. Oh, but I want it. I want the final episodes of Wild Cards so bad because the ending of the 9th episode. But, like, Wild Cards, 4-episode test, better than the last. Every episode was better than the last. Ending and culminating with something that I have noticed for a lot of these new shows or, like, returning shows, a full-on remake of a Patrick Swayze movie. Because Wild Card's 4th episode is Strangers on a Wave, which freaking loved that. The show is so, you've seen a movie before? So have we. Let's talk about it in it. All the titles are like weird little puns on existing movies. And so you think Strangers on a Wave, you think it's going to just be Strangers on a Train, right? Mm-hmm. No, it's a full-on Point Break parody.
Nice.
Where
nice.
the story of Wild Cards, right? I would love everybody to watch Wild Cards. The only person who you might definitely recognize on the show is Jason Priestley. Cause he's been doing Canadian like cop dramas and stuff for a while now. So I was excited to see that he was going to be in it. But the main show is a con artist named Max and a disrespected detective named Ellis have to work together.
Yeah, this is the one that's like very white collar.
Yeah, white collar is what some people have compared it to. And they're like, you're comparing this to
Weapon.
Lethal Weapon, kinda. Like, I don't know. It is buddy cop, but like we're so different. And it's the 48 Hours. Cop and Criminal would be like
Nice.
a better one to compare it to. Except the fact that like she's not that bad. She just was like raised in it. But Jason Priestley plays her father. It's been really good. But that whole Point Break remake, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm in heaven with this, right? And Tracker, the pilot of Tracker was really into setting up this whole story about his father and how his father was a professor at like Berkeley. And then he had
another one about this is another one about a guy that finds people, right?
Yes,
like
this is another guy who finds people, but not the same way as Found. He is totally, he calls himself a rewardist. He has two people, Velma and Teddy Bruin, who like searched the country for rewards for missing people. So
Teddy
it's
Bruin,
like
he literally has a friend named Teddy Bear.
It's a she, and yes.
Oh. But
yeah, Teddy Bruin. Yeah, no, I love it. I fucking love that she's.
Sorry,
she's
I thought the
Teddy
main
Bear.
character was a man on Tracker.
The main character on Tracker is a man, but then Velma and Teddy.
Has a friend named Teddy Bear.
I was telling you that Teddy Bear is a lady. I wanted to make sure that was known.
Okay.
The main character is Justin Hartley from This Is Us. Is Tracker.
But still,
what is I couldn't kill you Tracker's name. Cole, I think is maybe his name, or Colton. Yeah, I think his name's Colton. I just call him Tracker. And because Tracker is like the Incredible Hulk show if he didn't turn into the Incredible Hulk. He's just driving around helping people wherever he stops.
Amazing.
So
I can't believe that they had the teddy bear. They like that.
I love it. It's one of my favorite things. I'm glad that, thank you for like being as geeked out about it as I was when I found out about it. But yeah, so they call and they're like, hey, we got to beat on $25,000 for information leading to the return of like this stolen car or this person who is missing $500,000. So like he follows rewards and he has this whole code that he also follows in terms of like, I only get paid on the successful return of the person. Once I return it, that's when our contract goes into effect. So, like, I'm not going to take any money from you. I don't require any money from you until I've done it. But then once I've returned what you're looking for, you better fucking pay me. Like, don't be a dick about that. And Dale thinks that he is incapable of lying, which is probably the truth. And I don't know if it's like a character thing. They've never really talked about it as to if he can lie or not.
That on that really weird Tim Roth show, Lie to Me, right? Wasn't that the deal with like one of the? He had what was the? Oh man, they had a word for it. He was like not erratic or like, but some type of
pathologically honest.
Like a pathological like honesty or something like that. Yeah, it was something weird like that.
Yeah, I mean I don't know. I never watched Lie to Me. Something I wanted to watch. I just never got it in front of me. But yeah, so that's the whole thing. So he's told, then he goes and he does these things. The pilot episode established this whole thing where his father was a Berkeley professor, had a nervous breakdown, moved the family out into the woods. What it's heavily implied to be, based on everything that happened in that first episode, is that his father was suffering from like bipolar or schizophrenia, like bouts of anger that he could not control. And there's a scene in the first episode where like, so Tracker has an older brother and a younger sister, and the younger sister, he's like, we have to go. They're going to find us. Like clear paranoid behavior that like, it's sad. Like you watch this guy in the 90s and they just are unequipped on how to deal with this particular mental issue that he is suffering. Right. Like you also think about this, like how poor that is. And he's like, we gotta go. And the little girl goes, no, we need to wait for mom to get back. And he goes to hit the little girl and Tracker and his brother stop him from hitting the little girl. Cause like, he's not in his right mind. And like, I'm a mess during this scene. I'm crying because like, as much as, yeah, it sucks to be a kid and have to deal with it. It's not like the dad's an alcoholic or something like that. It is literally just his mind is betraying him.
Right.
And so that's the whole thing. But also because he made them all live out in the woods, he taught them all these crazy survival skills and things, which is how Tracker is able to do what Tracker does, is because of the teachings of his father. So then after the father realizes he's so like crazy that he almost hurt his daughter, he's like, you guys stay here and wait for mom. I'm going to go. and he runs out into the woods, and then Tracker's older brother goes after him. And then when they don't return for like a couple hours, Tracker goes too, and he finds his father at the bottom of a cliff, and his older brother is up there, and it's like looking heavily implied that he killed the father by pushing him off, right? Like, that's how I'm going to deal with it. They addressed it brief in the second episode, but then 3 and 4, that's just like completely fucking forgotten. And I got to tell you, I love Tracker when it is Tracker going around solving whatever, finding the person who's lost or helping to find the stuff, where he's like walking around being like, I'm a rewardist. You're a mercenary. No, I look for rewards. I don't kill people. And then him sleeping with the inexplicable like woman that he connects with in town, while also having this deeper like relationship with Rini, who is his lawyer on retainer.
So I know you didn't watch it.
Yeah.
And this is just Reacher. That's what this is.
That's fine.
Everything that you have described, you could easily apply to the first season of Reacher, and like everything that you have talked about, up to and including family drama in the background that leads to him like needing to like become this killing machine, like everything. So like, I was kind of joking that his name was Jack Tracker, because that's how these always go. They're always Jack Reacher, Jack Tracker, but like actually it sounds like they basically were like, man, Reacher did really well for Prime. What could we do like that?
Again, I didn't watch it because I have a difficult relationship with Jack Reacher, owing to, well, I guess it's been 5 years since it aired. At least, no, my God, it's been 8 years. 8 years since my time on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire happened, and I lost on a Jack Reacher question. So, yeah, I didn't watch Reacher. But, yeah, no, Tracker is something that I am absolutely in love with. Tracker's name is Coulter Shaw, so that we actually have it. I can look that up. But, yeah. And then, yeah, he has a lawyer that's on retainer, Rini, and they used to have something, because he's also, like, breaking the law all the time to be the Tracker. Like, he goes to a Burger King that's called, like, Burger Giant or something like that, but it's clearly a Burger King. And he's like, hey, could I see your security footage from last Friday? Because we got a missing kid, and he apparently came here with his father. And they're like, no, we don't show that to just random people who come into the Burger Giant. You're not a police officer.
A reasonable response to a strange man walking in demanding to see videos of children, right? Yeah.
Right. So and then he goes, oh, okay. And then he goes to leave, and he sees that like off of the bathroom hallway is the door to the office. So he just goes and breaks into the office and watches the footage, and then gets arrested for doing that. And then, like, Teddy and Velma get a call a lawyer to help, and they're like, oh, what about Rini Green? And they're like, no, they have that history, and it's going to be awkward for him. And they're like, yeah, well, she's the only one who's close by, and if he's in jail, he can't save this kid and get the reward for saving the kid. So we're calling Rini Green. And that's Fiona Renee. And I love Fiona Renee from her time on Fire Country, where she played Rebecca Lee. And I was really sad when they killed her off, for stakes. But I'm happy that it was so that she could be on this show. But also Fire Country, she could have just gotten out of prison. Like, she was like a week away from parole. Just let her get out of prison. You don't need to kill everybody. I'm just going to say it. And it sticks out like a sore thumb because it's kind of been the only death on that show, where for 26 episodes now, they have had to deal with life and death situations. And it was just this one woman. I mean, like, they've lost people who were into fires, but like the stakes still happen. The one where the woman that they're trying to save who caused an accident, and they don't realize that she's the hit and run driver, and then she dies and her family sues them. Like, that showed the life and death stakes of what they were doing. It's one of those shows where my mother's like, everything always works out in the end in Fire Country. I don't need to feel bad about it. But back to Tracker, because Tracker's the cooler show. The third episode of Tracker, and all of the titles of the episodes are where he is for the tracking. Yeah, so Springland, Idaho is the name of the third episode. See, Jim, I shit you not, it is fucking Roadhouse.
Nice.
And, I mean, with the new Roadhouse movie coming from Doug Liman later this month, I was excited to see a Roadhouse remake. And, like I feel a little weird saying that because it's not like 1-for-1 type Roadhouse, but it is guy with a helicopter terrorizing the farm across the way, trying to get people who live there to move so that he can build a resort in the town. Like all the parts of Roadhouse except for the fact that he's a bouncer at this club. Like I was surprised Coulter didn't pull out somebody's throat. That's what I was expecting the whole episode.
Just because it could be only because you brought it up. Some early reviews have come out of Roadhouse. Seems like it's going to be a pretty fun experience. Super excited. Really can't wait to talk about Jake Gyllenhaal and the whole UFC thing and blah blah blah. Everybody's talking about how surprised at how violent it is, and I don't think people remember the first Roadhouse.
He rips out a dude's throat. Like, that's his go-to fatality.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. People are just like, oh, this hyper-violent reimagining of Roadhouse. And I'm like, what do you people think the first one was like?
But I think where a lot of that hyper-violent reimagining of Roadhouse is, while there is a lot of violence in Roadhouse, there's a lot of violence in the first Roadhouse. A lot of it's kind of subdued. Like that first bar fight when he gets to the double deuce is a crazy fight, but like there are no broken bones or things like that.
Sure,
it's violent.
Like it's conceptually violent more than it is visually.
It's not
right?
ultra violent in the way of like, I imagine we'll see like a bone break through the skin in something. I know all the UFC stuff looks hyper violent in the materials that have been released about it. The weird thing for me about that Roadhouse remake, of course I'm gonna watch it. I fucking love Roadhouse, and before Peter Griffin made it like a household name, but one of those situations where like Doug Liman thought it was gonna be a theatrical release, so he's kind of like boycott Roadhouse, and I'm like, but I really want to watch it to support all the work that you did, Doug Liman. But you're the one who's saying, no, don't support this movie. Amazon lied to me. What? It's straight to streaming.
Straight to streaming?
Yeah. But then other things are like, that was always known. I don't know where, like, Jake Gyllenhaal has gone out and said, Amazon was very upfront about the fact that this was an Amazon release. So I don't know why Lyman thought it was going to get a theatrical release.
Yeah, weird. I mean, Amazon has put stuff in theaters before, but it's a bummer that there's not any chance to see it in theaters. But I don't know why you'd be surprised. In this day and age, you have to know when you're making a deal with a streaming service that's potentially on the table, right? And if he had these strong feelings, I feel like there was a point at which he could have talked about this with Amazon before the whole, announced release of the movie.
I agree. And I also think it's crazy that Amazon is doing that same sort of thing with like what looks to be a pretty strong like jewel for their crown, and they're releasing it the day of or the day before. No, the day of, right? Because there are March 21st showings of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire against an established like big franchise. Because you look at like Air and Super Mario Brothers last year, and now Roadhouse and Ghostbusters 4 this year.
I think Amazon is really truly banking on that we don't want to go to the movie theater attitude.
But I want to see something new this weekend. I agree. I don't disagree. I'm excited to watch it. I really am. And I'm even more excited after watching this weird, I'm looking for a girl who went missing in the woods, and everything else is Roadhouse. Everything else was fucking Roadhouse. It was awesome. Really, really enjoyed that. And then I know it's a show that's been around for a while, right? It's returning for its third season. It's killing it in its third season. This show, NCIS Hawaii, right? I'm going to talk about NCIS Hawaii. Just brief for a couple of reasons.
Wait.
Yes.
There's an NCIS Hawaii and they're on season 3?
Yes.
What? Since NCIS New Orleans, is this the next NCIS, or has there been something in between?
So NCIS New Orleans finished, and then they premiered NCIS Hawaii the next year.
Okay, so I'm not too far behind the ball, but holy shit, there's an entire NCIS I didn't know was happening.
You know about NCIS Sydney, right?
Oh my god, no. This is why I'm asking these questions.
Well,
Wait, is
NCIS Sydney was this year, 8 episodes. Will auditioned to be in a couple of the episodes. He didn't get it. These are the conversations we talk about. Did not do great. I am fully convinced that NCIS Sydney will be a one and done, because it was originally planned to just be a Paramount Plus series, but then searching for content, they played them on Tuesday nights, which is not NCIS night. Was originally NCIS night. NCIS night is now Mondays. And it's been like one of those situations where like, this is weird because they are like a little bit longer. So they had to cut stuff out of the over the air broadcast and things like that. But it's 8 episodes. It's not the thing I love about NCIS Hawaii. What I was going to lavish praise on NCIS Hawaii was it came out fully formed. As much as I loved NCIS Los Angeles and New Orleans, there were growing pains in both of those shows.
Yeah.
Like NCIS New Orleans didn't really feel like it had found its like true footing for the story it wanted to tell until the 3rd season. And NCIS Los Angeles, like kind of the 4th or 5th season, where Miguel Ferrara was there, and they finally like, no, Deeks and Kenzie can like each other. We don't need to will they or won't they with these two. And they brought back characters and all this other stuff. Like NCIS Hawaii, they like, here's a fully completed product. We have everything figured out with this show. Please enjoy it. And now in the 3rd season, Sam Hanna, LL Cool J himself from NCIS Los Angeles, since that ended last year, he has been a special guest star for the first 4 episodes of NCIS Hawaii season 3.
Nice.
And it doesn't look like he's going anywhere. Honestly, it looks like he might be recruiting somebody. Spoilers for season 3 of NCIS Hawaii, a show Sejan just learned existed.
Yeah.
It seems like he might be recruiting one of the members of the NCIS Hawaii team to an elite NCIS unit. Because the final reveal in the last episode was he's here on an operation codenamed Elite, and if I were to dig any deeper, I would be committing treason.
So
from
they
the
are
computer
backdoor
guy.
piloting a new NCIS.
That's what it
with,
feels
with
like.
LL Cool J. Yeah. He'll leave in a couple of episodes, and then we'll find out that next year we're going to be seeing NCIS Elite, or maybe this summer or something.
Yeah, and I would be completely fine with that. I would love that. And if it is the character,
what if it's NCIS Moonbase.
Well, all I know is that NCIS Sydney, since you weren't aware of that one either, the problem with that show, and this is interesting, is the Gibbs-esque character, the person who is like in charge of everything, is the weakest part of the series.
Oof.
And it's
kind of the anchor. Kind of need that one to carry.
And it's one of those situations where she tells these stories and things, and it's like I don't know if that was supposed to make me like you. Like Gibbs, right? We're talking about NCIS now on this airport. I love it. Like, he is the guy who, because his wife and daughter were killed, he went rogue and killed his family's murderer, right? And that's just a thing you need to know about that you eventually find out about this character who, like, is supposed to be this great law, like, upstanding, enforcing person. Is that in his past, he was a vigilante to take care of the person who killed his family. Mm-hmm. Right? And he, like, you forgive that because they don't just lead with that, right? For this character, I can't even tell you. Olivia is her name. She is, that might be the actor's name. Let me look up NCIS Sydney real quick so that I can have her name. Olivia Swan is the actor. Her character is Michelle Mackey. She is NCIS. At the start of NCIS Sydney, she is there because it's the first time that American, like, aircraft carrier is docking at the port of Sydney. So they have NCIS on hand to make sure that there's no attacks or anything like that. And there's a murder, right? One of the people from the ship is murdered. So that's why NCIS has to get involved. But also 2 Australian, like, special detectives find the body. So they're like, well, no, we're going to be working. This is our case too. So jurisdictionally, they kind of have to work together. And then at the end of it, the Australian, like, Inspector General and the assistant director of NCIS are like, we'd like to create a joint task force. Congratulations, you're now NCIS Sydney. And like, so there's a weird origin story in there. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, like, I mean, it's also the first NCIS that I know of that is not in America, which is an interesting concept considering that laws are very different in different countries, even ones that we feel like, we exist in the same kind of headspace in terms of what we consider moralistically correct and all that, right? At the end of the day, that doesn't, like, the written rules of law are extremely different between Australia and America.
Yeah, and I mean, other NCISs have talked about how they have a team in Italy or a team in Spain, but again, like, they're probably assigned to a base that's there, and again, so It's like, so it's an interesting thing there. And then all the stuff that Michelle Mackey's character is, like, she's so, I don't want to work with these people, and it's just like, shut up, like, they don't want to work with you either, but they understand that, like, it's their job, and they're trying. And the guy that she was there with, Deshaun, he really starts to get close with the female Australian officer, Evie, and they build it. And then the doctor, like, no disrespect at all to Ducky from NCIS. May he rest in peace, right? He just passed away. They just did an episode about it. The doctor on NCIS Sydney is the best medical examiner. Well, I would say since NCIS Hawaii, because she's really good too. Because NCIS Hawaii, Sejan, I'm so happy you've never seen it because you get to go watch it and enjoy it. Please enjoy NCIS Hawaii. You earned it.
Sure.
And everything I'm saying about Michelle Mackey not being this, like, good leader character, it's not one of those situations where because, it's the first time it's a woman in that role. Because you had Hannah, who ended up taking over for NCIS New Orleans when Dwight Pride, the guy, I can't think of his name, the other man of a certain age.
Scott
Bakula. Thank you. Bakula. When he was promoted to, like, director of all the NCIS offices on the southern coast of America. So, like, they had Hannah, who came in and was very, very good at her job. It was not one of those situations where we don't know how to have a female in this role. But then what they've done with Vanessa Lachey as the special agent in charge for NCIS freaking Hawaii is incredible. Like, she is so good at her job. And it's like, it's not one of those situations where, like, it's the first time trying that. You have two proven characters who have worked in this. It's just, like, I don't know what they were doing. It feels like it's one of those, this is just a streaming show, so we didn't put as much effort into it, which is a thing that I hate, but it's something that we've definitely found examples of with the streaming-only versions of broadcast shows.
Yeah, well, this gets to a conversation that we had last week, right? About that idea that streaming exists in this really weird realm where you have a certain group of people that look at this it's just on streaming, I don't expect good quality. Then there's this other group that go, well, because it's not on TV, because it is on streaming, there has to be something behind it that makes it stand out, that makes it, stand a cut above what I could just get on my usual CBS Monday nights, right? What is it? And so streaming shows and movies are kind of in this weird realm, like, in terms of criticism, like because people are coming in with very varied expectations right now. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but so it just really feels like that. And honestly, if there's a season 2 of NCIS Sydney, I would be very surprised. It feels like something that did not perform. I remember because I said, well, did you watch the premiere? Because it was a big deal that they were doing this crossover thing. We joke about Hollywood West, and that's what Australia became because of the pandemic. And again, he auditioned to be in the show. It's one of those things, that's how big it was. And he's like, yeah, no, nobody really watched it. It's been kind of the news cycle here is, remember NCIS Sydney? Yeah, it premiered yesterday. Were you one of the 23,000 who watched? So it's been an interesting thing. And just the show, it has everybody figured out except for who's supposed to be your anchor character. And that's disappointing.
Yeah.
Like it's very
There's
strange.
there's just also something to be said about the American like look at me exceptionalism of this idea that Sydney would give a shit about there being an NCIS show. Like how lucky are you that we're going to be bringing America's legal system to your shore?
Dude, and the
It
best
doesn't
part,
sound like something that would tantalize a lot of Australian audiences, shall I say?
the best part of that first episode is when they go to interview a guy at his brewery where the person who passed away was a couple of hours before they were found dead. And he's like, and the NCIS guy's like coming in real hard and everything. And then Evie's gonna be like, you need to calm down. Like, I can talk to him, and they talk, and he's just like, why wouldn't that work? Why don't we? She's like, well, because we have different laws over here. So like, yeah, no, he doesn't have to give us our stuff. Like, we can't threaten with a warrant the same way because he's not lying when he says there are no cameras in the bar. Like, we don't do that over here. We're not a police state where everything is recorded. And especially
that's more of a UK jab than anything with CCTV.
Yeah,
and
that
stuff,
same thing, like, but it was just like this really thing. He was like, oh, like I gotta threaten him. We gotta get that. And she's like, no. When he says they don't have footage, he's not being like a cock or like I don't trust the police. The bar was built in honor of somebody who was against surveillance. So like, they're not gonna have surveillance in there. I don't know what to tell you.
Oh,
and
man.
the way that like our credit cards are run, they don't get slips, right? Like it was like a really like great moment of like we're in Australia.
It almost feels like it could be satire, right?
Yeah.
Of like,
Yes.
yeah, we're going to bring this American justice system to this other to this.
Yeah, it works and it's very funny, and like that was one of those moments that made me laugh and like, yeah, like just because you're NCIS. That doesn't mean you're going to get the same information you would get in America by saying you're a federal agent. You're like, you have kind of jurisdiction here, but mostly because you're paired with us.
Mm-hmm.
And then like she couldn't have a gun for so many episodes because she was an outside like actor. It was so cool, that stuff. But the show itself, like, I don't know anybody who really connected with it. Even I haven't fully connected with it, though I love the like tech person. Blue is fantastic. And Rosie, the medical examiner, is fantastic. But back to NCIS Hawaii. I can't believe you didn't know about NCIS Hawaii. That's so cool to me. The fourth episode of season 3, total Point Break. And more, not just Point Break from 1990, but also Point Break 2015. Because they weren't just surfers, they were part of an extreme sports touring show. And the members of the tour thing, wherever they were, would like steal money and shit. But the best part about that one being a full-on fucking Point Break was at the bar when Jesse, who I feel is the one that Sam is trying to recruit to Elite, again, these are all just my own personal theories, he goes up to talk to the Bodie of the episode, who is this former motocross champion that Jesse, when he was trying to get into it in like 2003, like looked up to this guy and wanted to be this guy. So he's like, he mentions a race that he saw him at, and he's like, oh, that's incredible that you saw me at that event. And he turns to the bartender and goes, hey, Utah, get me 2. And like, that's one of the best parts in Point Break. One friggin'. Gary Cooper, what the hell is his name? Big
Gary
Teeth.
Busey?
Gary Busey. It's like, Utah, give me 2 about the meatball subs. And then, these meatball subs are so fucking good. I should have had to give him 3. But it's been this weird, like, the well that we should be exploring is Patrick Swayze. And it's like, yeah, all the time. And then I made a horse whisperer reference on one of the other shows. Do you talk to horses? I whisper to them. But it's been a fun new seasons of television and everything. Ghost just hit its 4 episodes, and it looks like the fact that one of them got sucked off may have been a misdirect. That's what it's called when you get sucked off the planet into heaven. I don't know if you're watching Ghosts. I don't want to sound hyper vulgar. Yeah, you either get sucked off or you go down. That's the joke. I like
Stupid.
Ghosts. It's not the best, but you know, it is what it is. Did you watch any of Not Dead Yet? Are you familiar with that? ABC's Ghosts.
Yeah, I am familiar with it. I have not watched it. Sorry.
So we started that one up because we just don't really have anything else. We're about 7 episodes in. I have to give Not Dead Yet a bunch of credit. First of all, it's going to make me read the book that it's based on because I want to know if the ghost stuff is actually there in Tales of a 40-something fuck-up because I can't imagine that it is. I can't imagine that a book written like that also has the main character, like semi-autobiographical, also has the main character seeing ghosts. So I want to see that. But I want to give huge kudos to that show because they did that thing that we always talk about when we talk about pilots for news shows, where they threw a bunch of possible threads that they could follow into the show. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, once it gets picked up, then, you know, we have all these things so that if the studio is like, the company, the ABC is like, we don't really like this part of it. Can you retool that? Can you get rid of that? Is it necessary? Not Dead Yet threw thousands of little threads in, and so far, all of them are still bearing fruit, which is awesome. Like the craziest thing 7 episodes in. Because I was pretty convinced her roommate would like just be her roommate. Like we wouldn't see him anymore. Like that's one less actor we have to pay. But it's established that, you know, he's a bit like a Sheldon Cooper, though admittedly he says that he has on the spectrum, like a form of autism. Like I would. First of all, I didn't know that character existed based on all of the promotional stuff I had seen for the series. So then when he shows up in the pilot, I'm like, oh, I bet there's a casualty of the pilot. No. In fact, the episode we just watched was all about him and his relationship with this girl. Because that's the other thing, is that the whole thing in the first episode is like, well, I'm going to San Diego to see my girlfriend. So it would be pretty easy where, like, well, he moved out. He's now living in San Diego with his girlfriend, so I have to find a way to get the rest of the rent paid. Right? Like, that could have been a plot line, right? And you get rid of paying another actor. But, like, his girlfriend came to visit, and it turns out that he was not showing his real self to her. And then she's like, I know that we're just roommates in your opinion, but, like, you're my friend, and I don't want you to be with somebody who doesn't let you be you. And it was nice. It was a nice thing. But, like, literally all the threads are still going on that show. And I think it's hilarious because The Irrational also putting a bunch of stuff into it, and very quickly it got streamlined down to just the one. Like they have this really killer line in the pilot where she's like, oh, so you're the science guy? And he's like, well, yeah, I'm the behavioral science guy. Bill Nye is just the science guy. And that was with a DA character who it felt like they'd be kind of jabby and flirty with each other. And then we never saw her again. But she is in the theme song recap every episode. And it's like, who's that character that we've never seen again? That's given a lot of screen time in this, huh? Who's that? I don't know. Like TV is definitely back, right? I have at least 2 shows that air every night. I'm going to miss Wild Cards because that show, it is the most fully formed show that I have watched since NCIS Hawai'i. So, like, big recommendation on that one. That one's harder because it's, like, in America, it's only streaming on the CW app, and the CW app only has ad-supported viewing. And it's also the CW, so you watch the same ad 8 times, which is just disappointing. I don't know. Like, I don't know what you're supposed to do with that, right? Like, they're selling some ad buy, but you need to find.
They need to really retool some of that. On the other hand, I don't know, because so many of these streaming services also look like they're about to give up the ghost this year. So,
I mean, yeah, Peacock and Paramount Plus talking about merging, and then they're not merging. And honestly, I love Paramount Plus is my favorite of the streaming services. I will just flat admit that. Mostly because a lot of the shows that are on it were shows that I could not watch anywhere else until CBS All Access, later Paramount Plus, came along.
It's that
And
promise of it's the promise of streaming that everybody else kind of made, but nobody else truly follows up on, right? Is this idea that because we are moving in this direction, it allows us to bring you this material in this way, and the fact that that has not panned out as well as we thought with, like, say, Disney, right? Like, remember when Disney Plus was announced and everybody was like, "This is it, they're ending the vault," and it's like, no, they're not ending the vault. This is just a new way to access the vault.
yeah. So, I mean, Paramount Plus has been great. Their original content I have enjoyed most of, though I'm still pretty fucking pissed off that iCarly 2.0 ended on this terrifying cliffhanger that please just resolve it. Give him a freaking movie to resolve it. I get, like, the show was weak overall. I enjoyed watching it because I liked iCarly, but that cliffhanger is just like, I need all these series that are ending and just without any, I don't know. What's the one that, like, How I Met Your Father, right? We know, like, we're going to talk about it. But again, even though that's not going to get a proper end point, it ended ambiguously enough that I can create my own ending.
Right.
iCarly 2.0 did not do that.
Right.
Like, they clearly was, this is it. The Equalizer, had the Equalizer not come back for a fourth season, did not do that. Like, the Equalizer's team were all tied up in a burning room. End of season 3. And it's just like, well, I mean, they would die, right?
Yeah.
That's how my mind would. There's nothing ambiguous about that. And they made it work as to how she saved them. Spoilers for Equalizer season 4. But yeah, it's been good to have this stuff back. Cleaning Lady is back. It just came back this past week, so it's only one episode. They're in a really shit spot because they killed off one of the male leads. Oliver Hudson's character was killed off in the final FBI raid of season 2. And then Aiden Kanto, who played Armand, the other male lead and, like, the love interest for the cleaning lady, his actor died of appendicitis cancer, which, like, your appendix, it might be vestigial, but it can still get cancer. And it can kill you, which, you know, just more things to be frightened of and aware of. So because he had that whole diagnosis, his plan was for him not to show up in the 3rd season of the series while he was getting treatment. It was going to be a whole, he's missing, we don't know where he is, maybe a couple of interstitials with him when he was feeling better. But him passing away, the 3rd season is still written in this way that, like, we need to find him, but, like, ultimately he's gonna be gone at the end of it. Like, there's no weird hope for it. But I have to say, in terms of first episodes of a season where you lost, like, 2 of the main characters, one by the writing you did and one by unforeseen outside circumstances, they've done a pretty good job as to what the 3rd season will be. They've introduced some strong characters. I'm excited to see what happens. And then I'm trying to think if there's, like, one other one that I'm watching. I had The Rookie. That's not it. SWAT. SWAT was the show that was canceled. And then so that they could do more East New York. And then everybody was like, no, SWAT, no. So they canceled East New York, brought back SWAT. And I got to tell you, the end of season 6 of SWAT was a happy ending for everybody. So then SWAT comes back. And the first episode, it looks like they fridged one of the only female members of the team, only for her to not really be dead, which is nice. It worked out that way. She was only, you know, choked out to unconsciousness, not death. But, like, is this real tightrope that I've been walking with SWAT for 5 of its 9 episode season. That's the other thing. Most of these seasons are 9 episodes long, which is crazy to me. Where, like, I was happy with the ending of SWAT, and you guys have to kind of invent conflict and bad things. Like, the 3rd episode, the secondary... First of all the other SWAT members that you kind of know are sort of gone. So, like, I've talked about Alexis Cabrera before and how I really like that character. There's also Miguel Alfaro and Stevens. I don't know Stevens' first name. I feel bad about that. Otis Gollop plays him. I've talked about him all on the show. So the first 2 episodes are, like, main members of the SWAT, all people who are in the opening theme song, right? Then the 3rd and 4th episode are, like, the B-team SWAT cast, because CBS is also doing this thing where they only have so many people in each episode.
Right. In order to save money.
In order to save money. So Bob Hart's Abishola is the best one of that. Bob and Abishola are the only ones who are contracted to appear in every episode of this 5th and final season of the series.
Right.
So then they did 2 episodes. It was really weird. Like, instead of doing 1 and 1, they did 2 episodes. Like, they did 2 SWAT, they did 2 Bob Hart's Abishola, and probably the reason why, like, I noticed this. So after, like, we watched the first one that aired this week, my mother was like, where was his brother? Where was this guy? And I'm like, there's only going to be 5 additional, like, formerly recurring or regular cast members who appear in each episode. And then the next episode airs, and, you know, so Bob and Abishola, her auntie and her uncle, her mother, and then, I don't remember who the other two, her 2 coworkers, Gloria and Gina Yashir's character, Kami. Gina Yashir being the creator of the show, which is why I mention it. So I'm like, so those are the 5. But then also, Abishola's ex-husband was in the episode, and my father's like, that's 6! And I'm like, no, Dad, he's a guest star. He's not part of the 5 that they have contracts with to appear in. Like, I think it's 5 episodes of the season is what they're contracted for, and then they can't have more than 5 contracted players in it. It's this whole crazy, the future of how television is going to be made thing that we're seeing with Bob Hart's Abishola. And it's fascinating to me, but, like, it's also the kind of thing that, you know, my parents noticed.
Yeah, they're going to need to work this system a little bit better if this is going to be something they do with other shows, because, I mean, like, it is always amazingly noticeable to me when somebody's not around. You know, I think of a lot of episodes of the later seasons of Modern Family where especially once the kids started to grow up into adults, and so their contracts were becoming much beefier, not only because they'd been on a successful show for 7 years, but also because, you know, you get older, you get more money. But, like, in order to save that kind of cash, reasons for Haley to not be around this week, reasons for Alex to be gone, like how do we write everybody out of the show for a little bit, like that kind of stuff. And you notice it, right? Like, you definitely pick up on it here or there, but generally it doesn't really affect too much of what's going on in the storylines of that show. Here, though, I from what I understand with this one, like, there's a lot of stuff that feels very awkward because there isn't somebody else there that maybe should be for certain conversations. You know, much to your mother's point of, like, man, really, really a big old brother-shaped hole in this episode, huh?
Well, especially as it's about his twin sister considering having a child via IVF. And then, like, the family discussion about what that will mean, who will be there for her to support her, and all of those other questions. Like, it was a little weird that her twin brother was not there to have that discussion. And it's all because of the almighty dollar. And, you know, in terms of Modern Family, I will always relate the heartbreaking story from Sarah Hyland that she found out that they killed off her grandfather in the show. Now, it was Fred Willard, so he had passed away in real life. Yeah. But she found out that on the show they had killed him off watching the show.
Yeah, because she's not
in the episode. And she's like, why wouldn't I be in the episode with my grandfather's funeral? And it's just like, that's the actor asking that question.
Yeah.
Like, that's a hard question to not answer, right? Even if you just focus more on that core section of the Dunphy family for that episode. Right? Like, don't bring in Dylan. Dylan's with the kids or whatever the thing is. So, yeah, it's something that we've definitely noticed before. But Babishola was the one that, like, we're having a final season, and let's also reveal to you all of the economics behind how we'll have to do that final season.
Yeah, well, I think this is kind of an interesting thing going on across the board, happening in video games and television and movies and all that, where for a very long time, we, as an audience, were really pushing for more transparency about how these things were being made. We really felt that we deserved some amount of it, right? And I say we because I did have and do have those feelings that like it needs to be more transparent to the audience what's going on behind the scenes in a lot of ways for a number of reasons. People's safety, right? People's finances, like the fairness of the work conditions and things like that. Like more transparency is definitely a good thing. However, I think a lot of companies are starting to really kind of see the downside of being so transparent to their audiences in so many ways.
100%.
You know,
yeah.
I mean, like the biggest symptom of this, I think you can look at is the rise and fall of Twitter, right? And the relationships that people then developed with creators, not just on screen but behind the screens on shows or in video games or in movies that they suddenly had this direct connection to. You know, it might not be one for one. I ask you a question, you have to answer, but this idea that I can send you a question and you might answer, right? And that whole rise in relationships that we got due to things like Twitter being the main example of that, right? Now, without Twitter, there's a lot of people pulling back in those relationships, and for some of them, it's a sigh of relief, right? Like I in gaming especially, right? Just look at whatever happened this week with all the Helldivers stuff. Did you hear about this? The developer, one of the developers for Helldivers, like apparently losing his shit on somebody, I think in like a Discord thread or something like that, and like everybody then turning around and demanding that developer lose their job for like losing their shit at a fan. But then like anybody that actually looked at the situation would have realized that this guy was getting trolled, and so he just lost his patience after being trolled for so long. Like there was so much discussion about like, did this guy go too far? And the end result was essentially, I'm going to step away from this for a little bit, and I think I'm going to need to step away from my relationship with social media for a little bit because I did go too far, but I also don't feel I was in the wrong, which is a completely fair way to look at the situation. But also, what that's going to lead to is them not being as close with their fan base as they maybe had wanted to be. But they've learned that that's not necessarily the healthiest relationship to foster.
I mean, yeah, it is very
really
different in a world with social media where there can be instant conversations between the creator and the fan base. And yeah, I don't know. Again, like the transparency is nice, right? Like understand that you're getting a final season with this show, so we'll get to finish this story, but know that in order to do that, we're going to have to make some sacrifices. Yeah,
and then just being very open with your audience about it and hoping that they appreciate it rather than sit there being like, I didn't. Now this just feels empty to me.
Yeah. And I will say this. I mean, 5 like recurring or regular cast members in an episode, that's like a normal amount to have. And the fact that they've built this like almost Springfieldian gallery of characters that they can have in an episode of Baba Abishola or something like Modern Family, these like large ones, like, and I don't know, like, did budgets balloon at some point where they're like, you can have as many fucking actors as you want in this show? And now they're getting smaller because of like the SAG-AFTRA like contract changes. Like, I don't know where the change came from.
Well, because we never really, but the reason that we don't know that is because we never knew where the money was going in the first place, right? Like it was so unclear where money was coming from and where it was going in the past. And lo and behold, now that they have to be more transparent about it because of things like the strike, suddenly now money is not as readily available, you know, and there's definitely some questions there. Where was it coming from before it was available? Or did it never truly exist and maybe we were inflating numbers here or there in certain ways?
Yeah, because I remember when I was on Carnival, one of the comedians I worked with had auditioned. He was in the pilot to be the 5th lead on Mike and Molly. You know, if we're going to talk about Billy Gardell, let's just go full pickle with that, right? And it was one of those situations where he was dropped when the show got picked up, and the pilot, as we've talked about, was reworked to not have him there. So that, like, I guess the 5th lead then became Bob's mom, as opposed to somebody else at the Eaters Anonymous meetings. Like, but like that whole thing. And it's just like, okay, then, because you're then watching the show and you're like, so who is the 3rd and 4th? And then where does like it go to like more recurring, not regular, right? Like you were going to be the fifth lead, which means you were going to be a regular character on the sign-in sheets, right? So it's like that was the thing where like I really wanted to explore it at the time, but even he's like, I couldn't tell you how the money works or anything like that. I just know that I'm going to be the guy that's like the person they interact with when they're at the Overeaters Anonymous meetings.
Yeah.
So it's something crazy, and it's something that is completely in flux right now, and I don't know. And I mean, is social media dying? Is it getting stronger? How am I supposed to feel about social media right now? I'm asking you
man. I signed
specifically
up
to
for
tell
all
me.
that Borderlands shit last week, and nothing has come of it since.
No, I mean, probably you had 20 minutes to download and play a demo before it got delisted or deleted, right? I kid. It's for the movie. I don't know. I just don't know. I mean, movies are a whole question.
I think that preview, by the way, has a big old Seagen's Gambit in it. There's one specific shot that we could talk about here, or you and I could talk about off mic. But I have a sneaking suspicion that they are definitely putting a final shot in that preview.
I have a sneaking suspicion that I'm going to see that Borderlands trailer before Ghostbusters 4. I officially got my tickets to go see Ghostbusters 4. And one step further, the family is going in Ghostbuster-style jumpsuits. I'm super happy about this.
Nice.
We bought them all and we tried them on this morning. Pretty excited about the Ghostbuster-style jumpsuits to go see Frozen Empire. Even though I'm not 100% feeling the movie. I will still admit that. I'm feeling it more after the second trailer, and then I've just stayed away from it. But we'll talk about it. I will have things to say if Season will give me a good 10 minutes on it. And if the Borderlands trailer plays before that, I would love to talk about it on the TV show, on the show itself, on the podcast, about what you feel is the Seagen's Gambit, because I don't doubt that for a second. Right? I don't doubt what you say for a second.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in that preview that makes me, that as a Borderlands fan, makes me raise my eyebrow, but also at the same time, as a Borderlands fan, I have no... They don't owe me anything. Let me put it that way.
Fair, that's fair.
Yeah. Making this movie doesn't owe me anything. I just need there to just be insanity in front of my eyeballs for 2 hours, and we'll talk about it. I don't know if you'll see it before Ghostbusters. I guess I wouldn't be surprised, because the trailer that's out right now is not a Red Band one, and so I could see it playing before that. But I mean, if this is the kind of Borderlands movie that I guess I hope it is, but at least think it is, with Eli Roth at the helm, it's not the kind of movie that I would take my family that I'm taking to Ghostbusters to go see with me.
And I get that, but I think the like fun of it, because I've seen I haven't heard it, I haven't listened to it. I've seen like visuals from it as I scroll through my timelines, and I don't have to like stop and keep watching. And thankfully, music doesn't just start up anymore. They realized that people kind of hated that. So I think the fun aspect of it, they might put it before something like Ghostbusters, just because, you know, it's a captive audience, and we want people to know that this movie is coming. I mean, what other movies are coming out that would play before?
I don't know. I mean, we got Willy Wonka and the Spice Factory this weekend. That's already hit $250 million after 2 days. Like, it's so I mean, like,
that came out last
going
weekend,
on.
didn't it? Or did that come out this weekend? Did Dune 2 come out this weekend? And I'm an idiot.
Yeah, Dune 2 came out this weekend, and it's second behind Kung Fu Panda 4, which is wild, but not a bad second. Like I said, it's making its bank.
Really? I mean, Kung Fu Panda Part 4, I feel really weird about. Like, there's part of me that wants to see it because I've literally seen every other one in theaters.
It's a perfect trilogy, so part of me is worried about seeing 4 because, like, I don't want to risk ruining what I consider to be like a no joke perfect like trilogy of film.
I get you.
But apparently, what the story is in this one, very much it's the Toy Story 4 thing where like everybody rolled their eyes when they announced it, but now everybody that's seen it is like, oh, actually.
I mean, Mr. Beast is in it. Dune 2 came out last weekend. March 1st is when it came out.
Oh! I thought you were saying that you didn't think it had come out already. Yeah, whatever. But
no,
like,
I thought it had
Dune
come out a
2's been
week earlier.
doing-
I didn't know this was the release weekend, and it wasn't, because I remember seeing all the popcorn buckets and the people saying, "I'm going to have sex with the popcorn bucket," and I don't like why do we got to live in that world, CJ? I mean, like, find your bliss wherever you can find it, but also, I don't need a picture of you on my Facebook feed saying I only came here to fuck the popcorn bucket on your T-shirt at the Dune 2 premiere.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I don't know. I mean, that's and I imagine with that week and the fact that Kung Fu Panda is definitely more family friendly and something we've been starved for in the theaters, right? Though not so starved that we would go see re-releases of Soul or Turning Red, not to jab or stab at them, but the fact that starved for family entertainment, but nobody really went to go see those movies.
I mean, they would have to tell anybody those movies were out in order for anybody to know to go to them.
Yeah, so. That's true. There was not the marketing for it. It'll be something if nobody goes to see Inside Out 2, then we can have a discussion, because the new trailer for that just dropped. And I'm sure that's because of Kung Fu Panda 4, right? You put that before Kung Fu Panda 4, Bob's your uncle. I don't know. But I guess all of this, we are, as we record this on Mario Day, 6 hours away from the Oscars, the Academy Awards, which are starting an hour earlier, and they still probably won't be done by 11 p.m., right? Even with that extra hour. Because, it's actors. They take advantage of the time to celebrate themselves, which is nothing wrong. It's just a thing. But Seijin, right now, without any thinking about it, what do you think is going to win Best Picture this year? Do you know the nominees, or do you want to have to look them up?
No, I want to say Barbie. I think Barbie's going to be the one to pull it out. I mean, with everything that's going on around the story of it, it seems like the one that's the safest bet. But there's potential for the rest. But I'm not afraid to go with the easy answer here. I'm going to put my money on Barbie.
I mean, along that same line, I would put it on Oppenheimer. I think those two are the front runners. Yeah. And I enjoyed Oppenheimer just a little bit more than Barbie. I will admit that. I would love if Barbie won, and, making money actually suddenly became part of being the best picture, right? Mm-hmm. Wouldn't that be nice? Change the qualifications just a little bit. It's cool that Barbie is nominated because of how much money that it made. And because of the fact that it is not your standard, I'm fishing for a Best Picture nomination film. So it'd be cool. I would love
for a wild turnaround, like if American Fiction wins it or some shit like that. That would be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to be Killers of the Flower Moon as much as I love Fraser and everything like that, and everything else about it. I just don't think it does it. The Holdovers would be my dark horse. Because I think that movie, I really loved that film, and it would be cool if it won an award for everything that it did in it. But I think Oppenheimer, if I were in a pool, would be what I said. And, now we have something to talk about next week. And not that I don't think I'm going to watch the Oscars. I'm just going to spoil that right here for everybody. I don't think I can talk about the full Oscars, but I can talk about who ends up winning once I can look that up tomorrow morning with my coffee. Mm-hmm. But again, if it sparks joy, enjoy the Oscars. I think there's just one more thing that we should probably touch on brief before we go. But is there any other topics you want to touch on before we get to the sad one and we end this one on not a downer ending? Actually, I think that some of the stuff that's come out related to it has been pretty inspiring. But yeah.
No, man. What you got?
The passing of Akira Toriyama was insane. The fact that he had passed away on March 1st and that his family was able to keep it a secret for 7 days before releasing a statement about that was kind of crazy. But then just the outpouring of love for him and everything that he created, whether you were an anime fan or a gaming fan, because he had his fingers in a lot of different pies. It turns out he was probably responsible for Mario. The look of Mario was very much inspired by the hyper-deformed kaiju stuff that he was doing with the Akale series. So, I don't know. It was one of those things that we recorded in Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe this past week. It's the Meyerowitz stories, new and selected. It's written and directed by Noah Baumbach, who, Barbie. He was the second in command on Barbie. He was the Ken to Greta Gerwig's Barbie. I mean, that doesn't sound as great as I mean, if you've seen the movie, but I
Seen the
mean,
movie,
it's a
yeah.
positive way, right? I mean, it as positive as possible. And then as soon as we finished recording, I got a message from a friend of mine who lives in Taiwan saying Taiwan. I don't know why I said it like that, about his passing. And honestly, I was looking forward to the Meyerowitz recording to finally purge all of my emotions that it triggered in me. And then new emotions filled that void immediately with the passing of the man who was one of the main driving forces behind something like Chrono Trigger, which is still considered one of the best RPGs ever created.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people are probably unaware of how much he really shaped a relationship between the East and the West in terms of anime and gaming and stuff like that. Like the ways in which the projects that he got his hands on became very consumable on this side of the world in a way that a lot of other things in those genres took a little bit more time, shall we say. There was something about what he was doing that made it so delectable over here. Like I mean, Dragon Ball alone, right? Like we could talk about that for a podcast all into itself. But like the ways in which those styles of storytelling were very new to us, and he ushered them in beautifully.
Yeah. And then like his work with Dragon Quest or Dragon Warrior, depending on the localization at the time. I mean, the iconic slime design is Akira Toriyama. Like, you do not my favorite part about his passing, right? Which is like sort of like the silver lining of it, is just all of the information I had no idea about that like he had brought to this world.
Yeah. But it's also it's hard to watch stuff like Steven Universe, right, is a good example of this nowadays, and not see like the influences of early like Chrono Trigger, early Dragon Ball, you know what I mean? Like the big wide eyes, the hair adding to the profile and all that, right? Like there's all of these little elements that you're just like, you know, without even thinking, you've consumed so much of this person's work that it now becomes kind of part of the work you produce, right? Which is how all of this stuff goes, right? And he was a font of that kind of knowledge, that kind of experience for a lot of people. So
yeah, I mean, as trying to not sound as much of a hipster as I could, and I understand that, like, I was watching Dragon Ball Z in 1993 when it was on like UPN or WB, not part of any scheduling block, but like 8:00 on a Sunday. It was cheap for us to license, so here you go.
Right.
And I like and it was just because it was interesting, right? I really like Sailor Moon that way. I remember in '94 when I was living at my grandmother's house, in the afternoons I could watch the original Dragon Ball on just like Fox. Just like showed an episode of it at 3 p.m. that summer, and I watched a good amount of that on the only channel in the house that actually got Fox good. So it was something I was aware of. And then 1998, when it was sort of made available to everybody through Toonami and actually, you know, being advertised, and you knew the exact time to go to watch it. So like, because they all end on those cliffhangers, right? That whole storyline element that, again, Toriyama is part of the reason why, oh, well, the manga hasn't caught up with the TV show. Let's do 16 episodes of them raising their power level.
Yeah.
Like he's part of that too, for good or for ill. But like when everybody could do it, and it was one of those things where like these shows that I watched, but I never really talked to about anybody, because anytime I ever tried to, I kind of got a blank stare back. Like, the fuck are you talking about? The hell's a Dragon Ball? It was just so interesting.
Well, no, anime didn't become cool until Linkin Park did a music video in it.
I mean, Speed Racer was from the 60s, so yeah, you're probably right. I just remember that moment where suddenly everybody cared about anime, and not everybody, but like more people cared about anime. And it was one of those things where I'm like, oh, this is weird. Like, it was kind of my
Right.
first, like, indie music syndrome moment
Yeah.
in my
Well,
life.
there's a shift in the history of anime specifically where it stops being a thing that you have to go buy VHSs from back rooms at video stores. Like it is suddenly available to people on their TVs. It is available to people, a little bit later, when we get online. Crunchyroll is one of the very first things to really kind of blow up online, right? Like, and Funimation does their own experiment with putting stuff up. Early Hulu had a lot of anime attached to it. There's just anime has this curve to it, starting in like the 80s, 70s, 80s that then goes off like a fucking bullet in the 90s, and a lot of that is because of what he brought to the table in terms of shows and storytelling and video games and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
I mean, it's a huge loss. It is, and we've only really had 3 days to process it. But it is, from the Say Report to Akira Toriyama and to everybody who was touched by his work, to his families, like, rest in power, and thank you. Thank you for everything you've done for the entertainment industries that we enjoy here at the Say Report, right? I can't think of any other better way to say it, Siege. All right, so with that, I think that's it. Anything else to add? Any other teasers for next week?
No, I just excited to hear what you have to say about once you get a hold of some things.
Yeah. Contra, Operation Galuga, that's going to be a big part of the next episode. So play some Contra if you're a Contra person. You don't necessarily have to play the new one, but the NES one, it's not hard to find if you're interested. But yeah, I think with that, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next Monday. And with that, William, please bring us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Stephen Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.